The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character. My father lifted his glass during the wedding reception. He announced loudly, so the whole room heard, "You are making a huge mistake marrying this poor guy." The background music abruptly stopped. My own heartbeat seemed much louder than the silence because no one applauded. Guests squirmed uncomfortably, forcing weak smiles. My husband Ryan had a trembling hand, but he held mine tight. I felt like the bride who had just been publicly destroyed while wearing a white gown. Everyone assumed this was the worst day of my life. They were mistaken. My father, Douglas, kept talking. He lectured everyone about marriage and money. Just minutes later, he would regret saying anything at all. I grew up in a house where quiet was more noticeable than affection. When Dad's shoes clicked across the hardwood floors, it meant the day was over. Mom's sharp, lavender scent would linger long after she walked by. She was always pretending she couldn't hear him raising his voice. We looked like the quintessential suburban family from the outside. Dad owned a small firm doing accounting. Mom, Sarah, volunteered at our church functions. My younger sister, Hannah, had a laugh that brought smiles to the neighbors' faces. And then there was me, Chloe, the daughter who always broke the rules. My father wanted me to marry someone rich. He used to repeat this like a ritual before every meal. Love is fine, but stability is what feeds you. I would usually nod, pretending to agree while I sketched blueprints for homes I knew I'd never own. I was working as an interior designer then. I freelanced for smaller companies. They paid late, but offered me coffee as thanks. For my father, this was failure disguised by politeness. The day I introduced Ryan to him, I instantly knew my father had judged him. Ryan shook his hand, smiled, and said, "It's good to meet you, sir." Dad's gaze immediately dropped to Ryan's worn leather shoes, and his forced smile vanished. Later that same evening, my mother called me. "He is just worried about you, honey," she whispered gently. She seemed to hope her voice could soften the intensity of his disapproval. Ryan wasn't wealthy. He was a junior software engineer. He saved every dollar for the future he believed in. But he was kind. Kindness was a currency my family had long stopped valuing. He would bring me takeout when I worked late on my computer. He left notes that read, "You are the most creative person I know." We started our life together with secondhand furniture and real first-rate love. However, family dinners always turned into a quiet conflict. Dad would ask, "When does he plan to get a real job? Or are you truly planning to raise kids in a rental apartment?" My husband would gently squeeze my knee under the table. That was his silent reassurance. Don't let him win. The evening before the wedding, my father gave me an envelope. Inside were 2 checks totaling $15,000. $1 was for me, and the other was for my sister. "Use this if you change your mind," he instructed. I stared at him. This was the man who equated money with love. "You should keep it," I told him quietly. "My decision is final," he sighed heavily, like he was watching an accident unfold that he couldn't prevent. Maybe that explains why he was unable to remain quiet when he raised his glass at the wedding. His pride was too loud. After the ceremony, months of silence followed. We didn't receive any calls or texts. Only my father's words echoed constantly in my head. Ryan and I moved into a tiny apartment located above a local bakery in Austin, Texas. Every morning, the scent of fresh bread filled our space. This helped soften the pain of everything we had given up. We learned to live modestly. A hand-me-down sofa, some chip dishes, and a houseplant that refused to die. It wasn't glamorous, but it belonged to us. When my sister finally came to visit, she stopped in the doorway. She whispered, "Dad said you'd be desperate and come back home." I laughed, though the sound was harsh. "Well, tell him I'm moving forward instead." She stayed for supper. She kept looking at our small kitchen, the light bulb flickering, the walls needing paint. "You two seem happy," she admitted, looking surprised. My husband smiled broadly. "We're happy. Happiness doesn't require expensive granite countertops." But I sensed she was holding on to something she couldn't share. Weeks later, it finally came out during a phone call late at night. "Chloe," her voice cracked slightly. "Dad told me to keep quiet, but they're having money problems. The accounting firm is losing clients. He's thinking about selling the house." I fell silent. I didn't feel satisfied. Instead, I felt a strange, dull ache where my anger used to reside. Our wedding anniversary arrived, and we decided to celebrate. My mother called first. She mentioned that my father wanted reconciliation. I agreed to meet them primarily because of my sister Hannah. We chose a high-end restaurant, the type my dad previously boasted about. He showed up wearing a suit that was clearly too loose now. More gray was visible in his hair, yet his arrogance remained. He lectured us on investments and financial responsibility. He insisted Ryan needed a more secure career path. It was the same old speech, just delivered in a fancier setting. When we were halfway through the dessert course, Hannah suddenly exclaimed, "Dad, maybe Chloe and Ryan can assist us with the financing." He stopped eating, his fork suspended above the plate. I stared at her. "What kind of loan?" A long silence followed. My father coughed. "That is not your concern," he dismissed. However, guilt was evident in Hannah's restless eyes. After they left, Ryan and I remained in the car parked outside the location. "They are in serious trouble," he stated softly. "And your sister shouldn't have mentioned it." I agreed silently. He is far too stubborn to ask for help. He would literally rather destroy himself than admit defeat. Ryan took my hand. "What action should we take?" he asked. I looked out at the city lights, which were blending together. "We should be patient," I responded. I had a feeling this entire situation hadn't reached its conclusion yet. My intuition proved correct. The next time I dealt with my father, he wasn't criticizing my life choices. He was preparing to create his own disaster. Several weeks later, my phone rang shortly after 12 a.m. My sister's name appeared on the screen. Her voice was shaking badly. She said Dad had asked her to co-sign paperwork for a business loan. He called it a simple formality, but my anxiety immediately spiked. "Hannah, absolutely do not sign anything." I warned her. She paused. She explained that he claimed I would never understand, arguing that I always viewed him as the bad guy. "Then tell him," I replied calmly, "that the bad guy doesn't ask his own daughter to rescue his reputation." By the following morning, I realized I couldn't just stay out of it. Ryan was already sitting at our kitchen table. He had coffee steaming and his laptop open. "We will find a solution," he promised, looking through complex spreadsheets and legal commentary online. "If he is using your sister as collateral, that is completely unethical and possibly criminal." We stayed up late many nights doing research. We had to read terms I never expected to know. Liability, fraud, misrepresentation, and financial exploitation. This wasn't merely a dispute over funds. Our focus shifted to protecting the only member of the family who still believed in the positive side of our relationship. A few days later, my mother called. She spoke in a low voice, saying, "Your father is extremely stressed. Please don't complicate things further." I nearly laughed out loud. What could be more complicated than watching him destroy Hannah's credit score? "No, Mom," I said firmly. "I am done pretending everything is okay." That evening, I drove over to my parents' house in suburban Austin. The light on the porch was still flickering, just like when I was a child. The interior smelled exactly the same. Lemon cleaning products mixed with my father's aftershave. He was sitting at the dining table surrounded by documents. "Why are you here?" he asked without looking up from the papers. "I'm trying to intervene before you ruin Hannah's future," I stated. He scoffed quickly. "Do not lecture me, Chloe. You made your choice. Let me handle mine." I pushed a printed document toward him across the table. "You mean the choice where you try to borrow capital in her name?" I spoke to an attorney. "This is fraud." For the first time, his eyes flickered away. "You wouldn't expose me." "I absolutely would expose you," I replied. He stood up, his voice trembling with rage. "You have always been overly dramatic. You think interfering is love. You don't understand true responsibility." "No, Dad." I met his stare directly. "I understand responsibility better than you ever did." When I walked out, the air felt cooler and my head was clear. Ryan was waiting outside in the car, his headlights cutting through the dark. "What happened?" he inquired. "He is trapped," I said, "but he hasn't surrendered yet." The following day, we met with our attorney, Laura. She was a woman with a decisive handshake and very sharp eyes. "Document everything," she advised us. "We need all emails, texts, and any evidence that proves Hannah was being coerced." Ryan confirmed. "We will prepare everything." The next few days dragged by slowly. My father completely stopped returning calls. My mother kept insisting. He is only dealing with stress. But I sensed that something more serious was about to happen. On a rainy Friday, Ryan turned away from his computer. His face was pale. "Chloe, look at this." He showed me the official notice. Dad's accounting firm was currently under investigation. The charges involved false signatures and the misuse of client funds. I felt no victory, only a quiet, heavy sense of relief. Laura was right. My father was finally going to face the consequences he had been avoiding for so long. What happens now? Ryan asked, taking my hand. I slowly let out a breath. Now we just wait for him to hit rock bottom. When he does, I will be ready. Holding the truth, he can no longer escape. The morning everything collapsed began with a call from my mother. Her voice was barely audible. They are coming for him, Chloe. I froze. I could hear the coffee machine dripping in the background. Who is coming? I asked. The investigators, she whispered. They are at his office right now. For a long moment, I stood still. Then I simply said, Good. Ryan looked up from his work. I must have sounded detached, but internally I was shaking. It wasn't satisfaction. It felt like years of built-up fear finally dissolving into quietness. We drove to the firm and parked across the street. Rain hit the windshield with a steady rhythm. Through the glass, I could see 2 men in dark overcoats and another man in a gray suit holding a clipboard. My father was standing by the entrance attempting to appear composed. He was clearly failing. Should we go inside? Ryan questioned. Not yet, I replied. He must face this alone first. For years he had criticized me for not understanding responsibility. Watching him standing there soaked by the rain, I realized he was the one who never understood it at all. Hours later, my mother called again. He is being questioned right now. They claim fake signatures were used on loan applications. He insists he didn't do it. He did, I said quietly. And he knows it. That night, the news broke to the public. The headline appeared on every local news feed. Cole accounting firm under investigation for fraudulent loan filings. Hannah called me sobbing. What is going to happen to him? She cried. I wanted to tell her he would be fine, but I knew that lies were what had broken our family in the first place. He will have to deal with the consequences, I told her instead. But he won't face it alone. I will be there for him. The following Monday, Laura, our lawyer, contacted us. They have agreed to voluntary cooperation, she explained. If he admits what happened, they might consider lighter sentencing. He needs proper legal representation immediately. I said, he will never ask me for help. Then you must appear before his pride consumes him entirely, she insisted. So we did show up. Ryan and I drove to the courthouse the next morning. The sky was painfully clear and bright, almost mocking the gravity of the situation. Inside, Dad was seated at a large table, files stacked beside him. His eyes met mine for the first time in many months. I expected his usual anger. What I saw was fear. Chloe, he began slowly. Why are you here? To ensure you don't drag Hannah down with you, I responded. He swallowed hard, his jaw tight. They said someone forged documents. They think I did it. You did do it. I corrected him. And if you don't tell the truth right now, they will charge her as well. Her name is on those papers. His eyes dropped immediately to the floor. I only wanted to keep the firm running for the family's sake. By using your daughter's credit by lying. My voice cracked slightly. That wasn't for the family. That was for your ego. Ryan stepped forward. His tone was firm but calm. Mr. Cole, now is the time to stop defending yourself and start listening. The investigators already possess the evidence. The only variable is whether you will accept responsibility or allow Hannah to face the penalties. A long moment passed without anyone breathing. Then my father slumped back into his chair, looking utterly defeated. I never intended to harm her, he whispered weakly. Then prove it, I said. Just tell them the truth. Laura leaned closer. Mr. Cole, I can negotiate favorable terms if you cooperate fully. It is your only viable option. He finally nodded slowly. Fine, I will tell them everything. The court hearing was efficient and emotionless, like watching a childhood memory being disassembled by a stranger. My father admitted to the misuse of funds, the fraudulent loans, and the false signatures. I sat next to Hannah. Her hand was shaking constantly. Mom was in the back row weeping silently when the judge finally delivered the verdict. His words felt both serious and somewhat forgiving. Mr. Cole, you betrayed the trust of your clients and critically the trust of your own family. However, your decision to cooperate is acknowledged. You are ordered to pay full restitution and will serve probation. It was finished, yet it felt incomplete. Outside the building, Journalists were waiting. Cameras flashed wildly. My father tried to hide his face, but when one reporter yelled out, "Mr. Cole, how do you feel about losing everything?" he stopped moving. He turned toward me. His eyes were watering, and his voice was barely audible. "You must be pleased now." I shook my head slowly. "No, Dad. I am simply relieved that you finally told the truth." He stared at me for an extended period, searching perhaps for the daughter he used to manage. Then unexpectedly he whispered, "I am sorry. It wasn't loud enough for the reporters to catch just for me." Weeks went by and the media attention faded away. Hannah's name was officially cleared, and she returned to her college classes. My mother began calling more often. Her voice was softer, almost tentative. "Your father has been very quiet," she shared one evening. "He is selling the remaining parts of the firm." I offered no comment. Some conclusions don't require discussion. Then one afternoon, someone knocked on our apartment door. I opened it to find my father standing there holding a small wooden box. He was dressed in jeans and an old sweater, the type he wore on weekends before his life became defined by business deals and ledger numbers. "I wanted you to have this," he said. Inside the box was his antique pocket watch. "When I was little, he never let me touch it. It belonged to my own father," he explained. "He gave it to me when I first established the firm." I ran my thumb over the engraved initials. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. "Because you were right," he admitted. "You managed to build something honest. I destroyed what was mine." For the first time ever, I noticed genuine tears in his eyes. They weren't tears begging for pardon, but tears that showed he finally grasped the full cost of his arrogance. He started to leave, but I called out, "Dad." He paused, waiting for me to speak. "You told me I made a mistake by marrying Ryan." He sighed softly. "I remember saying that." I smiled faintly. "It turns out he saved this family far more than you ever could." He nodded, his shoulders drooping heavily, and then he walked away. That night, Ryan found me sitting near the window, the pocket watch softly ticking in my hand. "Are you feeling okay?" he asked. "Yes," I answered. "It's strange. I spent years wanting him to apologize, and now that he has, the pain is gone." Ryan smiled gently. "Perhaps that is the sound of true healing." The watch clicked again, steady, alive, and rhythmic. I realized it wasn't just a symbol of lost time, but of time we had regained. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or insignificant. I felt genuinely free. Life felt different a few months later. It was quieter and less burdensome. It was the kind of silence that restores, not suffocates. Hannah moved into a new place near campus. She still called every Sunday, usually laughing about trying to cook meals that didn't come from a microwave box. Mom visited weekly, sometimes bringing baked goods, sometimes just sitting to chat. For the first time in years, her eyes didn't look like she was concealing someone else's suffering. Dad maintained his distance. He sold the business, paid his debts, and began working part-time handling bookkeeping for smaller businesses. "It is very humbling," he once admitted to Hannah. I couldn't decide if that was growth or just regret, but perhaps it didn't matter anymore. Ryan and I successfully launched our own design firm, small but ethical. We even hired several interns, young individuals who reminded me of myself when I was terrified of failure. Sometimes I would glance at Dad's old watch ticking on my desk and smile. It wasn't a smile of victory, but of peace. The last time I saw him was at Hannah's college graduation. He stood silently in the crowd, clapping, his eyes moist. When he looked across at me, he didn't utter a word. He just nodded once. In that tiny wordless moment, I knew we had finally made it through. I used to believe revenge meant watching another person suffer. But now I understand it as watching them learn, watching them confront the truth they ran from, and finally grasp the meaning of real love. My father lost everything he created, but somehow we all achieved something far better. Honesty. If this story reminds you of your own family situation, remember you are not alone. Sometimes the process of healing begins when we stop struggling to prove our worth and simply start living it. Share this reminder with someone who needs it,